Boom.
Biddly, 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 bo. Yes, yo. Here we go. Ain't nobody down round here. You know what time it is. I brought some grapes up. I've ended up polishing them all off by 4. The idea was just to have a couple while I've created this vid, while I got my ideas down, while I got through flicking through the articles. Ended up whacking them all off, whack-a-mole of grapes up in this bitch. But that's not why we're here. You know what time it is. Get that badger in and on and over here. We had to move back to get his greatness in. We're very conscious of the clock watchers. We had a few clock watchers yesterday, a few people commenting saying that I've got an obsession with Trafford. Of that, there's no doubt. Today's obsession is Nick Pope. Certainly obsessed with Trafford. Who wouldn't be? Obsessed with making sure that the intros are 3 minutes 50 long, which I don't know how true that is, but somebody put yesterday that the video started at 3 minutes 50, and I'm not sure that is true, even if you disagree with the topics being discussed. I think grapes is a reasonable entrance to a video, but obviously if you're just here to talk about solely Leeds United, then you're either in the wrong place or you've got to skip to 3 minutes 50. But we're not going to wait that long this time. Quick ship vid. Clock watchers are out. Clout chasers in. Badgers in and on and over here. The big money signings might be on hold until July the 1st, and this is due to obviously PSR and FFP and all this stuff, all the hoops that you have to jump through. Basically, the annual accounts are ultimately reset on July the 1st, so it's just all moving money around into last year, into this year, etc., into next year rather. That's why many of the clubs pay for players in instalments. So if it's a £30 million fee, they'll do 12 million for the next 3 years, which that mathing 12, 24, 36, with a 6 million interest. But in fairness, they do interest on certain figures and fees and stuff, and they will pay the price. They'll loan it off banks, and then they'll pay the interest on top of that, so that the clubs will wait. Because a lot of people would think, well, you'd go for the cash buyer, wouldn't you? If, say, it was 25 million, somebody offered you 25 million today, and then somebody said, I'll give you 30 million, but over 3 years, you'd want the 25 million, wouldn't you? You'd take the £5 million hit, but they're paying fees and all of the stuff, so that's how it ends up rising. It just makes it easier to manage as well on their books, isn't it? So the profit keeps coming in, as opposed to just one bulk in that year. Then, if you spread it over 3 years, they can probably do devaluing of players and all sorts of things they can do. As we know, it's PSR and all that shit. For context, we bought Joe Rodon. And then he said Joe Rogan then. We bought Joe Rodon on the 2nd of July, which obviously fits in with the 1st of July 2025, straight the day after we signed Joe Rodon, which is very unlikely, when we'd previously had Joe Rodon on loan. It's very unlikely that we waited until the 2nd of July and then got that deal done. So it's clearly a bit of a deal that we've got going on with, well, at the time, Daniel Levy. There is actually some talks that Daniel Levy might be getting pushed out. I saw some, don't know whether it's nonsense this morning, but saw a few viral videos of some Spurs fans saying that he might be on his way out, which begs the question about Solomon, because he would be one of like the big signings, wouldn't he? 15, 20 million we're potentially talking for Solomon. And I started to go not off the idea of signing Solomon. I think we should get him if we can. But I started to presume that it perhaps wasn't happening. But then when I saw that we didn't sign Joe Rodon until the 2nd of July, I thought might just be the case where we're waiting, got it sorted out with my man Daniel Levy. Ampadu we bought on the 19th of July. Sorry, Badger. So same thing. That might have been, a case where, we started working on that when the window opened on July the 1st, or when the books turned over, when the books opened to the Mafia boss thing. I've got an example here of what I was saying before about, spending money before June the 1st. For example, if Leeds were to sign a £30 million player before July the 1st, 2025, that fee would most likely be reflected in the club's 2024 accounts. Given United made an approximate £61 million loss in 23-24, the first of 2 years spent in the Championship, and a similar loss is expected to be reported next spring, 2024-25 campaign, it may not make the most sense from an accounting perspective to report such an investment before the year's June 30th cut-off. So as much as there will have to be cut-offs in place in certain spots, you've got to pick a day, aren't you, ultimately, when the new year starts. It's, there's just ways around it for clubs. I honestly think it's all a bit of woof. I think it just supports the biggest clubs in the world, and it's just all this, Aston Villa are going to be up against it this year and stuff. They've had a really good year, never been in like much of a better position, or certainly not in my lifetime, since Caraboni or something where he called that used to always score worldies against us when we were in Prem, when we were all decent in Prem. Aston Villa were a decent outfit, but Carabonia or something, or Carabona. He was a good player. Always scored some mint goals against us. They were good games and Villa games, but I always seem to think that we got done over in them games. But which is probably just a figment of my imagination. But I remember playing them like quite consecutively, like home and away, or maybe in cup and then away. I want to say in the Bridges season when he got loads of goals. I want to hazard a guess at that season, but regardless. Paul Scholes has said on the on that fan thing, on that fan account, I've only read this quote because I can't watch that fan account thing, which is ironic, really, when I watch, other Leeds creators like, Lockie, Luke and Joe. I watch their stuff and they are Leeds creators, but the actual idea of watching a lot of fans talk about their club to Jimmy Carragher and Paul Scholes is fresh hell to me. I think it's absolute shit talk. I enjoy this stuff because it's Leeds stuff. So I don't know, that guy that supports Man United with dark features, he's horrid. He's a horrible goon. That guy that supports I think it's Chelsea, who's going on a mad one about James Maddison lately. It's just like, it's awful. But basically, Paul Scholes has said, when teams come up, if they can score goals, they've got half a chance, which is what I've been trying to say. That's why I don't want to go up and shit ourselves. I don't want to abandon the fact that we scored a bucket of goals last year. I don't want to start putting 10 men behind ball and defending. Farker football doesn't even set us up in that way anyway. It will be, it's not gung-ho. It's not quite as Bielsa as previously, as Bielsa. He's not as Bielsa, obviously. Nobody is. So Farker's a little bit more pragmatic, a lot more pragmatic. But, I still want our wing-backs to be getting forward, and I still want to be trying to create chances, because if you can't create, we'll just go down playing really poorly. So let's go try and actually make a bit of a fist of it. The Athletic have reported that my man Longstaff's future is uncertain at Newcastle. I actually don't think we get him, which I think is a shame. I know that I've got an add-on for Longstaff. I think he'll be a mint signing. He apparently turned down a few opportunities to leave in January, but his contract is running down. 12 months left, so it might be the case that Newcastle want to get him out the door and a bit of P that they don't need in real life, but again, just to appease them arse rules, them lame arse rules that have got us all under cosh, because it's pure profit with Longstaff. Because obviously he's one of the kids from the block from the very beginning of Newcastle when Longstaff were a youth. The only alternative to that, now that they're in the Champions League, you have to have a certain amount of homegrown players in your squad, or your squad gets reduced in terms of numbers. I think it goes down from a 25-man squad. It gets reduced accordingly. So if you don't have, I think it's possibly up to between 4 and 8. Somebody be able to correct me. I'm not certain how many you need. It doesn't mean that you don't fall into anything. You just get your squad reduced by that amount of players. So it just, you've basically got a small squad within the Champions League. We're obviously in need of signings, and it is obviously on everybody's mind at the moment. But I thought it'd be worth, whapping this out there, that we do have some of our own players that are obviously contracts are running down for current players. We all know that we're in Bamford's last year of his contract. Darlow's in his last year contract. Meslier, Silent S in his last year contract, and Cairns. Now, you'd argue you just let all them run down. I think with with Bamford and Cairns, you just let it run down. I do find Darlow an interesting one, because I really don't think he'll be happy as a number 2. And if we bring someone in, he then becomes the number 2 by default. We're probably going to be looking to sell Meslier, Silent S. But my worry with this all, which also goes into my worry with Nick Pope, is that there's a lot of things have to evolve and move before we can start thinking about bringing a keeper in, really. When you've got them 3 all in the last year of the contract, Meslier, Silent S probably wants a particular type of move. I think he'll still see himself as the number 1 at the club, if I'm honest. So I think it's difficult to just, bomb him and get him straight out of there. Who would want him? He made a lot of mistakes last year, so there's no suitors, I don't think, in England really are going to want him, or certainly not at Prem level. And you'd argue, not in Championship, and I don't think he's going to dip down any lower than that. So I think it is a move to France or Spain or somewhere where we can get like a solid, decent side of, you know, an eighth in league, ninth in league. What do you think where do you think his future lies? Bamford, I would just let him run down his contract. I would keep him in and around squad. I think he'll be useful and he might pick up a few decent goals for us next year. We might need him a little bit more than you'd hope. We're apparently talking to Callum Wilson, but whatever, you know, you think of that. And Dan James is also in his last year of his contract, but he has opened up and said that they are in discussions with his contract. So you'd want to get that one sorted, I'd say, because I think Dan James could definitely seize his opportunity in the Premier League this season and cement us in the Premier League. I think he's a really, really good squad player. I think he's never going to let you down. He's a good starter. Yeah, my worry with Nick Pope, a few people have mentioned that he'll be involved in the Trafford swap, the best goalkeeper in the world. So it'll be Nick Pope to Burnley, Trafford to Newcastle, and that'll be part of the part of that jigsaw, part of the deal. But that also there's a lot to happen for Newcastle before they want to ship Nick Pope. So if that's not the case, you know, we have to get rid of Mez. We have to tell Darlow that he's then second in line. Then we have to bring Nick Pope in. Newcastle have to accept that they're going to buy Trafford or at least somebody else. They've got the Bravka on books. They've got this other Gadger on books that are, you know, they're not going to want to be third and fourth goalkeepers, but also not going to be in a rush to leave. Nick Pope's got 2 years left on his contract. He probably thinks if Trafford comes in, I can fight for my place and be the number one. You know, also, if Newcastle then say we're actually open to him moving and we've got Trafford in or they've got whoever they're wanting and Dubravka's happy to be second in line and then Nick Pope goes, all right, well, I'll leave. I think a few suitors come in and then, you know, they join the chase, which enters into a whole, you know, can we afford to mess around when it comes to keeper, really? No, we can't. But, you know, there's a lot of things need to happen. There's a lot of mess needs sorting from, particularly in the Nick Pope scene, at Newcastle, at Burnley, and at Leeds United. It all needs sorting. You know, that's one place that Burnley is strong if you believe that Trafford's the best goalkeeper in the world and one of the best footballers in the world, in and out of field. They won't want to lose him necessarily, so they'll want a player with somebody as good as Nick Pope in. It's a very interesting position. I've said that for weeks now on end. Dictionary corner and all aboard the potential bullshit bus. So all aboard into Dictionary corner, because I've no chance of saying this guy's name, but you will have heard him if you're watching Just Joe yesterday. Igor Paxiao. Lockie absolutely loves this gadget. So, you know, Lockie very rarely gets it wrong, as we know with Tanaka. You're only as good as your last performance, so Lockie, if you're watching. And if you're not, then it doesn't matter. But everybody knows who you are, so it's fine. Plays for Feyenoord. It would be a real statement. I can't profess to know much about him, but I have watched his highlight reel. And as you would expect, the highlight reel's through the roof. He's only 24 years old, which is perfect. They are talking about £34 million asking price, which is more than I want to spend on a single player instinctively. But I do understand that, you know, you've got to weigh up the risk and understand that big-time players are going to cost big-time money, aren't they, on occasion. I just don't want us to, you know, put all his eggs in one basket necessarily. He had 26 goal involvements this year for Feyenoord. Brighton are apparently interested in him. You will be interested and delighted to learn that Everton, nowhere to be mentioned when it comes to Igor Paxiao, but Brighton are apparently interested. So this fella looks up to Rafinha, which is a good start. And what is an even better start, his stats are better than Rafinha's before Rafinha signed, which I must add, simply must state that they're the same age, basically, give or take a few months, obviously, because I think Rafinha was 23 before we signed him, and then this fella's 24, but you're talking months in it, but his stats are good. They're better overall. So what we're saying, certainly not saying that he's ever going to eclipse my man Rafinha, because he's gone on to be a potential Ballon d'Or winner and what have you. So, but it's an exciting few weeks, as we know, boys. Keep them subscribers coming in. It's much appreciated. If you could smash a like for us, all that stuff really helps the channel. Thank you each and every which one here. Let's go.